For those of you who are joining us virtually, our camera has been a little spotty today, but the audio should still be working. So apologies if it goes out, but it should kick right back on. So, all right, good afternoon and welcome to the advisory committee meeting for the 2024 hemp implementation. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules today to attend this meeting. My name is Nicole Blase and I am the rules coordinator for the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Today's meeting is being recorded. For those of us joining virtually, please ensure that your phone or computer is muted unless you are speaking. Only invited committee members will be a part of today's conversation. Members were selected due to their level of interest or position within the community. With that in mind, we ask that each of you serve as goodwill ambassadors to the discussion so that you may represent your constituency professionally. Please be courteous to other committee members so that we don't have multiple participants speaking at once. If you are joining virtually, you may use the raise hand function in Teams, or if you are calling in, please interject when appropriate and we will call on you in order. Non-committee members will be able to tender comments during the public hearing and public comment period. Committee members, please state your first and last name when you make a comment for the record. All right, let's get started. Today is Tuesday, May 21st at approximately 1:05 p.m. Many of you are familiar with the rulemaking process, but for those of you who have not yet had the opportunity, or for those listening in, I will begin by saying a few words about rulemaking and the purpose of advisory committee meetings. The purpose of an advisory committee is to increase the public's involvement in the drafting and development of administrative rules. The Oregon Legislature, through its enactment of the Administrative Procedures Act, ORS Chapter 183, stresses the critical importance of the public's participation in policy development. Advisory committees are an excellent way to solicit input from internal and external stakeholders who are likely to be impacted by the development or amendment of agency policy and rules. Consequently, advisory committee invitees may include licensees, permittees, industry representatives, OLCC staff, members of law enforcement, local government, the public, local community organizations, small businesses, and other interested stakeholders. The purpose of having all of the members on this committee today is to hear from different parts of the industry and public health and safety partners. Our role today will be to explain the background and context of these rules and the changes that are being proposed in this package. During this afternoon's meeting, we will seek your input on the proposed amendments to the 2024 hemp implementation rules package. Section 2 of 2024 House Bill 4121 directs the OLCC to develop by rule a methodology to distinguish whether a cannabis plant is marijuana or industrial hemp for purposes of sections 1, 4, 5, and 6 of this 2024 Act. The methodology must include testing criteria and cannabinoid concentrations above which immature or mature cannabis plants are presumptively considered to be marijuana. This is essentially re-implementing Section 41A of 2021 House Bill 3000, which was repealed January 1st, 2024. In 2021, the OLCC adopted OAR 845-026-4100 to implement that section. OAR 845-026-4100 was repealed on January 2nd, 2024, following the repeal of the statute it was implementing. Commission staff are proposing to re-implement substantially the same provisions that were previously in OAR 845-026-4100 to enable presumptive testing of hemp crops in the 2024 growing season. All right, we will now move on to introductions. I will be calling on our RAC members to introduce yourself. Please state your name and the organization you are representing. Again, I'm Nicole Blase, and I am the rules coordinator for the OLCC. I'll pass it to Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Crowley. I'm the Hemp and Cannabinoid Compliance Coordinator for OLCC.
Hi, I'm Aldo Simon. I am the Public Health and Consumer Protection Policy Analyst for OLCC.
Howdy, I'm David Sandford. I'm the Laboratory Compliance Coordinator with the OLCC.
Shannon Hoffeditz, interim director of licensing and marijuana compliance director.
Thanks. I'll move on to our RAC members. Danette Wernette. All right, Margaret Flushinger, I know you're here from this morning.
Yes, Margaret Flushinger, Oregon Health Authority Medical Marijuana Program.
Thank you. Courtney Moran.
Hi, everyone. Courtney Moran with Agricultural Hemp Solutions.
Thank you, Courtney. Gabe Parton Lee. Patrick Trujillo.
Hi, everyone. Patrick Trujillo, Chem History.
Great. Would you like to join us at the table? Or?
Sure.
Great. Hi, Gabe.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. Let's see. Jason Peterson. And Devin Benbrook.
I'm Devin Benbrook. I have White Oak Ranch and we have about 100 acres of hemp at the moment.
Great. Thank you. You're welcome to join us at the RAC table.
Okay.
And thank you to everyone who has joined us virtually today. We'll go ahead and get started. I will turn it over to Stephen Crowley.
Yeah, so hopefully, famous last words, this should be reasonably straightforward and painless. I guess before we jump into the rule changes here, just some notes on what we are and aren't going through in today's RAC. We have a handful of different rulemaking actions that are happening throughout this year. We have our general bill and technical package, which we had a RAC for this morning. We also have the hemp registry concept from House Bill 4121. That's a larger concept. There's a lot of new pieces going on there, and that doesn't take effect until January 1st of 2026. So we'll be discussing it soon, but not in this rule advisory committee. The package that we're tackling today is basically the hemp-related elements of House Bill 4121 that are potentially effective sooner than January 1st, and then just some technical cleanup that goes along with those changes. So with all that said, the first rule that we have a change in today is 845-025-1310. Adding in, the rule previously said that this is the rule governing when OLCC licensees can have products with artificially derived cannabinoids within the OLCC license system. I previously said that it was one of the criteria was if the cannabinoid was not in the commission's judgment impairing or intoxicating. The proposed change is to add at the intended concentration in the item. And that's largely to clarify the dose makes the poison. The higher amounts of something that's not intoxicating at smaller amounts can become intoxicating, and particularly avoiding getting into a tricky situation with CBN where lower dose CBN products we've regarded as non-intoxicating. But realistically, if you scale up the dosage, CBN and especially 11-hydroxy CBN bind pretty well to the CB1 receptor and are, if it's just a binary intoxicating, non-intoxicating, that'd be a lot more difficult judgment call to make.
I have a clarifying question on that, Gabe from Northwest Natural Goods. What are the factors that the commission will use in its judgment, and will those factors be made public for sort of decision-making purposes, just so that the industry is aware as well of what things are intended to be intoxicating or not?
I mean, I think to a certain extent, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis as things come up initially. Most of the artificially derived cannabinoids that come up, it's not controversial. Everybody accepts, delta 8 THC is intoxicating at pretty small to modest concentrations. The CBN is a little bit trickier, and so I mean that's something that we look at the available literature. We consult with our partners at the Oregon Health Authority and with experts in the field, just kind of using all the resources that we have available to reach a conclusion, explain how we reach the conclusion. Any further comments on that change? All right, we can move on to the next rule that has changes. So the next 5 or so rules that we're going to go through are all related changes. And this just comes down to last year, the Department of Agriculture expanded the privileges of the hemp grower license. So that now a licensed hemp grower, as long as they've gone through the appropriate process with ODA, they can take the hemp that they harvest and trim and dry that into usable hemp, or they can process that into hemp keef. And previously, a grower could basically only handle the bulk harvested crop, minimally processed for transportation. This change makes it so that a grower can have usable hemp that they may want to transfer into the OLCC system, if they want to transfer into the OLCC system. And so this set of changes basically makes our rules mirror that, so that the hemp grower with an OLCC certificate that gives them that metric account so that they can sell into the adult use marijuana system, they will now be able to transfer in usable hemp and hemp keef in accordance with their ODA license privileges. Specific changes there are mostly just adding in 4 hemp items and then adding in the ability to transfer to a retailer, because usable hemp or hemp keef could potentially go to a retail directly for sale to a consumer, where the whole unprocessed hemp really would have had to go to a wholesaler processor first. Then 2750, same kind of change, adding or hemp items, specifically usable hemp manufactured in compliance with ODA's regulations or hemp keef, as defined by ODA and manufactured in compliance with their regulations. The next rule change is a little bit further on in the chapter, 845.025, 5800. So 5800 through 5850 are OLCC's rules describing how the testing rules apply to hemp items that are being transferred into the OLCC system. They are basically and there are a couple of changes here that are harmonizing. OHA recently made some rule changes that adjusted some language. This is making those conforming amendments, and also spelling out how a grower certificate holder can test usable hemp or hemp keef in the same way that a hemp handler certificate holder can.
I have one in that definition section. I'd like to add I'd request an addition, Gabe again from Northwest Natural Good. I'd request a definition for consumer. Because I think later in the chapter, I think it defines consumers as consumers in Oregon. And there's kind of back and forth references to consumers generally and then consumers as individuals in the state of Oregon. And so it might be more efficient to just jam that all into one specific definition of what the intended rules intend to cover.
Thanks, Gabe. Yeah, we can take a look at that and where some of the consumer in Oregon is specific to those particular rules. Yeah, we can take a look at how we use consumer in these rules and make sure that it's clear.
And yeah, just for note taking, 845.026.0410 has reference to consumer in Oregon or imported into Oregon for delivery agents for consumer for adult use cannabinoids, and so it's not necessarily 0.25, but there's large scale.
Yeah, thank you. Specific changes in the first section here in 5800 are adding in a definition for hemp keef so that we don't have to keep saying keef as defined in ODA's rules. And making clear that industrial hemp concentrate includes hemp keef, just like concentrate in the marijuana system includes marijuana keef. Next rule section of changes is 5815. And the first real change there is in subsection 2P. If a wholesaler is requesting a test on behalf of the processor, the wholesaler must provide, in addition to their own license number, and the license number of the processor. So this is just a conforming change with OHA's rule changes on testing. If a wholesaler is testing a hemp item on behalf of a processor who made the hemp item, it works the same as a wholesaler requesting testing on behalf of a marijuana processor.
I have a clarifying question on that. As a laboratory, when we're taking in these samples and whatnot, we're obviously supposed to be recording these certificate numbers and things like that. Is there going to be some sort of distinction in the cannabis tracking system to further distinguish what currently is like the agricultural hemp versus like hemp handlers and hemp processors and things like that? That was kind of a point of confusion for me while going through this.
Yeah, so anybody who is requesting testing as described in these rules, they have their metric number that goes with the hemp certificate, or yeah, with the hemp certificate. And historically, those have matched up with their ODA hemp license number. It just has a different prefix on there. Since we've switched to the CAMP online licensing system, any new hemp certificates that we issue just have a short license number that doesn't correspond to their ODA license number. So yeah, for tracking purposes, I mean, that's the license number that you'll receive the item from for testing, is that it's still the prefix 330 or 320, but it no longer matches one-to-one with their ODA number. Next change here is just adding in that a grower certificate holder can order compliance tests for usable hemp or hemp keef. And then the rest of the changes here are not actual changes, just weird formatting where non-breaking space ended up instead of a regular space for some reason. Word flags it for us. Next rule, 845-025-5820, compliance testing requirements for industrial hemp and hemp items. Again, same change here, where it used to be that there were requirements that were specific to hemp handlers because they were the only ones who would have usable hemp or hemp concentrates and extracts. This just generalizes it to certificate holder because a grower can now have usable hemp or hemp keef tested. And this is some added language clarifying that a commission certified hemp grower has to have every process lot of hemp keef tested as required and in the same manner as cannabinoid concentrates. And like with all the testing for items that are being transferred in from a ODA hemp certificate holder to an OLCC licensee, they also need that potency test in addition to the required tests. Whether the potency test would ordinarily be required or not, that is kind of the threshold that they have to meet to show that they're under the THC limits in 845-025-2760.
I have a question on this one. Dave again from Northwest Natural Goods. The process lot of hemp keef test for adult use cannabinoid. If the determination of what is an intoxicating artificially derived cannabinoid is on a case-by-case basis, then is there a list of what is determined to be an adult use cannabinoid based off of that intoxication?
You're right. That's a good question. There is not currently, but in the context of this rule, that's the name of OAR 333-007-0430 is adult use cannabinoid and CBD concentration testing. It's just the terminology that's used in the testing rules to refer to right now THC, THCA, CBD, CBDA, and delta 8 THC testing, but with the general name, because in the future there may be other cannabinoids that need to be added there. All right, 5830, same change again, changing handler to certificate holder to include growers for the usable hemp there. And adding the requirement that each batch of usable hemp or hemp keef be assigned a lot identifier, and basically the same requirements that apply to handlers, just more of that harmonizing and expanding the privileges. All right. So that takes us through the hemp grower related changes and out of Division 25 into Division 26. And there's a couple of different things going on here. So right now, 845-026-400 has the concentration and serving size limits for hemp items in the general market, sold outside of the OLCC licensed marijuana system. The statutes that relies on, there's two separate ones. There's a statute in ORS 475C 257, and that's the one that OLCC has authority to enforce. And then in ORS 571-309, that's the authorizes almost exactly the same limits, but it's up, those are the ones that are subject to ODA enforcement. They're set by OLCC in consultation with ODA, but those are for ODA enforcement. And historically, we had those as just a single rule with those limits, but for clarity, we're splitting those out. We're leaving the 845-026-400 to be the ODA limits, the limits that they can enforce, because that's the rule that's currently referenced in ODA's rules. One of the small differences is that those limits are specifically limited to products for human consumption or intended for human use, where the OLCC limits apply to products just intended for consumption or use generally, and not specific to human. And then the other change that's in here is House Bill 4121 this year directed OLCC to establish criteria for approving artificially derived cannabinoids in general market hemp. And that those could not be more restrictive than the requirements that we have for products within the OLCC market. The trick there is that OLCC does not have the authority to approve any products until January 1, 2026 with the hemp registry rules, which we'll come back to at a later date. So in the meantime, this rule is putting in basically the same requirements that we have for products in the adult use OLCC license system, where a product can only contain an artificially derived cannabinoid if it meets all of those requirements. There's the CBN is allowed as long as it meets the these requirements that they've conducted a hazard analysis and documented any preventative controls up until January 2nd, 2025. Otherwise, basically the artificially derived cannabinoid, the manufacturer has to have either determined that it's grass generally recognized as safe, or submitted a new dietary ingredient notification and received a response from the FDA on that. These are the same requirements that currently apply to marijuana items. This rule change would make those apply in the general market. And then further down the line, we'll get to the rule, there'll be an approval process that's tied to the hemp registry for those products starting January 2026.
Thank you for putting these in. I think this is some good progress in Oregon. And I'm just hoping that we might be able to extend the sort of the allowance through 2026 through the registration date. Because we're talking about rules that are sunsetting in 3 months. And by the time that the rulemaking session is over, it'll be probably 2 months of the effective date. And so if there's an opportunity here to put this through 2026, then it makes this the statute effective, and it allows us to actually plan for the market rather than have 2 months of safe harbor.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very narrow window of time where the CBN exemption, that goes through January 2nd could apply. As far as I know, the agency is not contemplating pushing that out any further, and there was a lot of discussion, when it got extended through January 2025, several artificially derived CBN manufacturers were on that rules advisory committee. They were all very certain that they would be able to, make a best determination prior to January 2025. We haven't had any industry requests to the agency to extend that until just now. So that's not something that's currently being contemplated.
Is this the proper forum to trigger the contemplation?
I will make a note. Any other feedback on the changes in OLCC 400? All right. Oh, and one other change in OLCC 400, when setting the limits for per serving and per container, there was no serving limit set for hemp tinctures. So, in theory, this would allow a 100 milligram single serve tincture. It shouldn't be potable, so maybe not. But in any case, this is just cleaning that up and applying the same per serving limit so that a consumer of a cannabinoid hemp product is not going to be surprised by the amount of THC that might be in a serving, so that it's consistent with the THC levels per serving in edibles and other products. All right. 845.026.410 is a new rule, more or less duplicating the language that we just looked at in 400. But this is the one setting the limits that OLCC can take action on under ORS 475C 257. And has the same language about allowing artificially derived cannabinoids if they meet the same requirements that are currently in place for our marijuana license system. And the main difference is that this has civil penalties specified. Those were previously in 400, but now that we're splitting out, 400 is ODA. OLCC doesn't set civil penalties for ODA, and that language has moved down to 410 here.
Raising the request again through 2026. The original OLCC rules were, we ended up with like an 18-month extension, and this is to be by statute intended to be regulated at a rate that's not greater than the OLCC. I know that the OLCC cannabis level extension only goes through 2025, but as we're talking about hemp in the open market, we'd like to reiterate that request.
Noted.
I do see a hand raised. So conversation today is for invited RAC members only. So if you have questions or comments after listening in today, you're more than welcome to contact us after the meeting. Thank you.
David Stanford with the OLCC. Have you heard specifically from CBN processors who are trying to get this grass that they're getting close, or like that time makes the difference?
There are, I do think it'll make the difference, but not for the, not necessarily for the same reasons. So we're waiting, I know that some of the, processes are waiting for some sort of direction from the federal level. The FDA has, claimed that it would provide a structure, or it's asked Congress for a structure for how to deal with these products. The amendment to the Farm Bill may have something to do with it. But particularly with these, the how we term them artificially derived cannabinoids, they might fall in that synthetic exclusion within the Farm Bill. And so where these folks are trying to decide is whether there's any return on the investment to go through the GRAS studies and then have them banned at a federal level. And so those are the, some of the weighing factors. And I know that that's not necessarily your problem, but it is, it does affect downstream how the industry reacts and how, these larger, processors are making decisions based off of how they want to position themselves, either as a dietary supplement, as a food additive, or whatever. All of that is within their decision matrix, I guess.
Thank you, that's helpful.
One question, Patrick Trujillo, Chem History. So the serving size limits and everything make complete sense. One thing I did have a question on though is one thing that makes some of these hemp products a little bit unique is that they're aiming for a very, very small amount of these adult use cannabinoids, CBD, THC, anything like that. One example could be that I know of is aiming for about 2 milligrams of CBD in like an entire liter of a container. So right now, these limits of ensuring our LOQ is below half the 0.3, that's no problem. But when we're looking at something with such a massively lower concentration relative to that, would that then fall on us to provide the servings and total potency for that entire container? Because if so, we just simply have to switch over to like a mass spec or something like that. But I just want to get a little clarification before,
Yeah, David, do you have thoughts?
I have thoughts. But I think I have to think on that to get an exact answer. The hemp world
it's very unique, yeah.
Chat with or laugh about.
Yeah,
Also.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to, we can chat more too, so I can get more detail, but.
Cool. Just wanted to bring that up, so everyone was kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, totally.
All right. next rule here, and this one thematically fits better in the hemp registry package that we'll bring to an advisory committee in the not too distant future. But House Bill 4121, the amendments in section 9, section 9 to 571-309, those did take effect immediately, directing OLCC to establish criteria, standards for approving industrial hemp products that contain artificially derived cannabinoids. So these are implementing that. These are the standards for approving products with artificially derived cannabinoids. Calling out at the top that will start January 1st, 2026, along with the authority for the hemp registry generally. The standards are, again, basically the same as what we have for in 845-025-1310 for the adult use system. And I think the only significant difference is that this rule doesn't include the CBN exemption through January 2nd, 2025, because by the time it applies, that date will be passed.
So this is Gabe again from Northwest Natural Goods. So there's a world where CBN is approved through the end of 2024, and then under the same standards of approval, can't be approved again until January of 2026.
Even January 2026, the HACCP kind of path for CBN will no longer exist. That's January 2nd. So the standards for starting January 3rd, 2025 and onward are going to be the same as the standards for approving 2026, which is the grass of the NDI pathways.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Any other thoughts on that before we move on to presumptive testing? All right. So this is the last rule in this draft for discussion today, presumptive testing. It's lined out like there are changes all over, but those again are non-breaking spaces turning into spaces or spaces being deleted at the end of sentences. So there are no actual changes proposed from the temp rule. And the temp rule for this is substantially the same as the previous rule, 845-026-4100, that was adopted after House Bill 3000. That was repealed when the provision of House Bill 3000 lapsed. The legislature re-implemented that kind of language in the statute, and so we have the rule once again where when a ODA can go and take some samples from a crop, and if it's the criteria are spelled out here, but for a mature plant, if the average of at least 50% of composite samples is above, I believe the threshold is 5% total THC, then that crop is presumed to be marijuana. Same thing that has been in place since the harvest season of 2021. All right, and if there's nothing more there, I think we can move on to fiscal impact.
Yeah, sure. All of our rec members received a fiscal impact questionnaire. You're welcome to return that at a later date, but are there any possible fiscal impacts of these changes that anybody would like to discuss in this meeting? Anybody online or in person? Yes, Patrick.
Again, Patrick Trio, Chem history kind of just goes back to my last question. The only impact would be scaling up or switching methodology if we're basically going to be required to do total cannabinoid potency for some of these large serving size type containers, which are unique to hemp.
And I guess just to clarify, when you say total cannabinoid, are you talking like, THCV and all the various minors that people are looking at, or just the total THC, total CBD?
Sorry, I should have been a little bit clearer. I just mean total THC and total CBD per container.
Right.
When their container is kind of large.
Yes.
Any other fiscal impacts that anybody would like to discuss or have on record today?
Yeah, again, the Gabe Partonley from Northwest Natural Goods, the date of implementation for artificially derived cannabinoids affects the labeling and packaging of products, as well as, sort of scale up and buy up of products, just to make sure that we are in compliance with this rule that's going to exist for 2 months, and then prepare, in preparation for a market withdrawal if we're unable to meet that deadline as of January 2nd, 2025, in advance of the 2026 implementation date. So it's a lot of a rush to prepare for the next 60 days to determine whether there's any viability of product, and the packaging labeling associated with it, with labeling as a artificially derived. Right? These are all costs.
Anybody else fiscals or any other comments, questions, concerns from our RAC members today? All right, well, this was very fast. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and providing your feedback. We will be posting notice, a public hearing in the next month-ish, so that everybody who's joined us from the public can submit written comment, oral testimony during the public comment period. And so everybody will be made aware of that. And of course, if you have any other questions for our subject matter experts or otherwise, I put the email, our rulemaking email, in the chat. So thank you to everyone and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.